Hello, my name is Mantouvalou and I will talk to you about our course Human Rights in Europe. This can be taken both as a full course throughout the year, Human Rights in Europe, and as two half courses. The first part of the module is Theory and Practice of the European Convention on Human Rights, so this can be taken separately. And the second part of the module is the European Union and Human Rights. These two components make the full course, but they can also be taken as half courses. This course is very important both for UK lawyers and for European and international lawyers. The European Convention on Human Rights, for example, that we will be discussing in the first term of the course, in the first part of the course, has become the most influential supranational legal order. In that part of the module, we will be looking at theoretical aspects of the European Convention on Human Rights. The module teacher for that first part of the course is Dr. George Letsas. The approach that Dr. Letsas takes towards this course is a theoretical one. He examines the interpretation of the European Convention on Human Rights by the European Court of Human Rights. What is the approach of the court? When does the court find a breach of the Convention? How does it apply a test of proportionality in the European Convention on Human Rights, and what does this mean? Are there any absolute rights? And again, what are the implications of absolute rights? Because the Strasbourg system is such an important system, this course will be of interest both to national UK lawyers, as the Human Rights Act incorporates the European Convention on Human Rights in UK law, to European lawyers because of the effect of the European Convention on Human Rights on the 47 member states of the Council of Europe, but also to other international lawyers, people from other jurisdictions. The European Convention on Human Rights is the most effective supranational regional human rights system, so this course is very important for that reason. Even though the approach is theoretical, quite philosophical, there are specific examples that are discussed in the course. Freedom of religion, for instance. When can the state set restrictions to freedom of religion? These are very heated debates throughout Europe, but also around the world. And issues like this will be covered in the course. Some procedural issues will also be addressed in the course. So, for example, how can one take a case to the European Court of Human Rights? What are the admissibility conditions? And again, how effective is a decision of the European Court of Human Rights? What should we make of the approach of the UK government, for instance, that has recently been unwilling to comply with the decision on prisoners' vote? Prisoners' vote is a topic that we will address in the course. So in the first part of the course, the approach is fairly theoretical, as I said, but at the same time, we look at specific rights: freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of association. So even though the approach in the course is fairly theoretical, the students will examine also specific rights, so the theories will apply to specific rights. This is how we will approach the topics. Freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of association, prisoners' rights to vote. These are all examples that will be discussed in the course. Dr. Letsas has written a book and several articles on the topic, and he will base his teaching on this type of readings. There will not be a set textbook, but there will be several readings that will be very engaging and will encourage students to think critically about human rights law in Europe. The second part of the course, Human Rights in Europe, is called the European Union and Human Rights. This is a fairly new topic, and that's one of the reasons why it's very exciting. The European Union did not have until recently a Charter of Human Rights. Still, human rights law became increasingly central in the European Union. This has happened through the approach of the Court of Justice of the European Union, through the European Court of Human Rights indirectly, and the overall tradition of the Council of Europe in European human rights. This part of the course is taught by myself, by Professor Pete Eckhout, a leading authority in EU law, and my colleague also, Colmo Kineda, who is a reader in law here at UCL, but also a member of the European Committee of Social Rights. So we will be looking at issues such as what is the role of the European Court of Justice in the protection of human rights in Europe? What is the relationship between the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights on the one hand and the Court of Justice of the European Union on the other? Do the courts talk to each other? Will the European Union accede to the European Convention on Human Rights? In addition to the discussion on the relationship between European institutions, such as the European Court of Human Rights and the Court of Justice of the European Union, in relation to human rights in Europe, we will be looking at substantive issues. So, the human rights of migrants in Europe. What are the human rights of migrants in Europe? What do courts say about the human rights of migrants in Europe? Freedom of religion in Europe. How do courts approach freedom of religion in Europe? Human trafficking for sexual and labor exploitation. There is a directive at EU level now on sex trafficking. What is this directive about? How does it help? The European Court of Human Rights has addressed this type of issues, and we will have a discussion of the relevant case law in this part of the course. In the context of human rights in the European Union, a major debate has to do with social rights and economic freedoms. There is a need for greater economic integration, but can this happen at the expense of fundamental social rights like the right to form trade unions, the right to strike, freedom of association? How does the Court of Justice of the European Union address this type of conflicts? And is this compatible with the way that the European Court of Human Rights addresses this type of conflicts? In the context of the EU, there is also a conflict between civil and political rights and economic freedoms. So economic freedoms that are so central in EU law seem to come to conflict with fundamental human rights. How should these conflicts be resolved? This is the type of things that we will be looking at. Another topic that is covered in this course has to do with human rights in the external relations of the European Union. Can the EU place human rights clauses in international trade agreements, and what are the effects of this type of clauses? So on the one hand, human rights within Europe, human rights within the European Union and the type of conflicts that these generate. And on the other hand, human rights in the external relations of the European Union. The course Human Rights in Europe is assessed by essay. The first part of the course is assessed by a 3,000-word essay, and the second half of the course is again assessed by a 3,000-word essay. Students particularly like writing an essay for this course. This is because in the essay they can focus on the topic that they have found most interesting about the course. The essay also gives the opportunity for independent research and for critical analysis. This course, Human Rights in Europe, does not have a set text, neither the first part of the course nor the second part of the course. We will have a lot of articles that we will read and book chapters. We will have sections from books. This is one of the strengths of the course because it lets students engage critically with the topic, read different views on human rights in Europe. Thank you for listening to the description of the course Human Rights in Europe. As I said, it has two parts, the theory and practice of the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Union and Human Rights. You should feel free to take either the whole course, the whole academic year, or the separate parts of the course. I look forward to seeing you in the new academic year.